This comes from a man in his 50s who started having problems with his bowels. He says, sometimes I don't go for days, other times I get an urge to empty I can't control, and I can't get to the loo quickly enough. What can I do to make myself more regular, and can diet make a difference? Now, Amelia, what's been your experience?
Well, this is a really relevant one to me because I had exactly the same problems. I found that I actually found it quite difficult to admit to myself that I was actually quite constipated. And once I'd actually kind of accepted the fact that actually this is a problem, I then went and spoke to my GP, who I'm very lucky to have a really good relationship with. So I felt quite at ease to be able to talk to her and say, this is the problem I've got. I then got referred to a bowel and bladder care unit where I was able to see a nurse who, we went through several things, but none of it really worked satisfactorily enough that I felt I had any control over it. So she then advised me about a system called Peristine, which is effectively, it's a pump with 2 tubes. One tube attaches to a bag of water, warm water. One tube attaches to a catheter which has a balloon on it. You put the catheter up, inflate the balloon, pump the water up, and it makes everything move. Mm. And I've always been one of these that if it's likely to work, then I'll give it a go and see if it's going to help. Yeah. And so I agreed that I would try this. I was, they supported me the whole way through it. And I was able to try this system, and it worked. It absolutely worked. And it's changed my life without being it has changed my life completely. Because it's given me back control. Mm-hmm. I now know that I use it kind of every other day, and I know then for the rest of that day I don't have to worry because I have taken that control back. And it's given me the confidence to be able to go out. I was in a situation where I actually didn't want to leave the house because I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen. And that's horrible because you're just trapped. And this has given me the freedom to actually take that control back and give me the confidence to kind of say, look, this is okay, I can do this. Yeah. Because it works.
So why is it that some people are affected with an urge that they don't feel they control, and other people might be affected by constipation? Why is it so different?
Definitely,
in
there
people
is
with
a
MS?
group of people that if they are constipated, it causes fecal urgency. And I think a lot of people that come to see us initially, we always go back and they'll say, oh, I'm urgent, or, I've had accidents with my bowels. Yeah. But actually, if you actually talk to them, they're actually constipated.
That's a really interesting one because that happened to me a couple of times. And it was that thing of, but I know I'm constipated, but why is this happening, and why am I not getting there in time, or why is this actually, I'm constipated, so it doesn't work.
And I think then it's going back to, because the majority of them probably have reduced their fluids.
Yes.
Because they've got bladder issues.
Absolutely.
So they've reduced their fluids, so their stools has got harder, and it acts as an irritant in the lower bowel sort of thing. And of course, because they don't have the sphincter control, then they end up being incontinent, or they have overflow and bowel incontinence. So really, when I see them initially, because I tend to see them perhaps before they go and see the gastroenterologist and Peristine and things like that. We do talk about fluids, and sometimes it's getting their bladder sorted out before we can get their bowels sorted out, because it enables them to drink more and drink the right things, or the amount they're drinking. And it is going back to look at their diet as well, because a lot of people don't have a good diet, and or it just needs tweaked a little bit, I will say, because sometimes things that perhaps if they've got fecal urgency, things that didn't bother their gastrointestinal pathway, it was all right before, but perhaps it's something that irritates their bowel now. Yeah. So I actually always tell people to do at least a 3 or 4 day diary of their bowels, or to try do a diary of when they've had urgency and been incontinent, to look back and see, well, what did they have in the 48 hours? What was different? Or Because there might be just something in their diet that's triggering things off.
And sometimes people will increase their fibre intake to try and cope
Yeah.
with the constipation, but they won't increase their fluid intake with it. So actually they make the constipation worse. Don't
Yeah, and it's not knowing that,
Because
though,
everybody
that's
thinks,
the problem.
because everybody thinks they should have really heavy,
Exactly.
stodgy fibres sort of thing,
Yeah.
but it's actually what we call soluble fibres, so it's, you know, the fruits and the veg and things like that,
Yeah,
things that are going to go through
absolutely.
them a wee bit easier.
It's quite interesting that you say that, because actually when I was referred to the bowel and bladder care unit, it was for my bladder initially, and they said, but hold on a minute, put that to one side, because it's the bowel we've got to sort out first before we can do anything else, because your bowel's not working properly. And then it's like, oh yeah, okay, no, it's not working properly, but I didn't want to say that.
So I had kind of said about getting the bladder sorted out, but certainly if your bowel, if you're constipated, that can be affecting your bladder as well.
Yeah.
So they do
They
go
do
together.
work in
If you're
together,
constipated,
don't they?
how might that affect your bladder then?
Well, a lot of people like frequency, urgency, or retention. That actually
Difficulties in passing urine.
yeah, and I mean it works, you know, so sometimes we do have to get, especially if people, I mean we'll talk about it later about catheters and things like that, but certainly if they've got catheters in situ, you know, they're there all the time, they wouldn't drain properly or things like that.
I mean, if
they're
you think about how
constipated.
close the bowel is to the bladder, if the bowel is very, very full,
Yeah.
it's generally going to press on the bladder. And if you've got a very irritable bladder from having MS anyway, it's going to make that irritability much, much worse. So sometimes the two go hand in hand, but most people will come in and they'll say that they've got a bladder problem probably before they'll admit that they have a bowel problem.
Yeah.
We're more able to talk about bladders, much more embarrassed to talk about bowels.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.